We're at Evolution 2 and we kick off the show in arguably the best way possible.
I'm on my own, against the wall.
Bianca Belair's back, and even though she isn't here to wrestle, she is here to deliver some groundbreaking news. As after soaking in the warm welcome, on behalf of WWE, she announces the return of the Mae Young Classic. As she says that the winner will be crowned at Survivor Series, with their reward being the number 30 spot in the Women's Royal Rumble, and if the winner fails to become the Royal Rumble winner, they will get a guaranteed mid-card title shot of their choice, which brings out none other than the returning Kiana James. And she's complaining that rather than the former assistant general manager making the announcement, it was an injured wrestler. But then Bianca Belair drops another bombshell, and that is that the first round match is right now, and Kiana James is in the opener. But who the hell is her opponent? Well, it's none other than a legend coming home. Paige is back in WWE, and she's in the tournament, but can she advance? Well, the match is on, and Kiana instantly hides on the outside. She wasn't prepared for this, yet Paige was, as she grabs her, and after hurling her opponent into steel steps, she sends her into the ring and starts pounding Kiana with punches over and over again. Then she connects a swinging leg hook slam, aka the Page Turner, which is quickly followed up by a rampage, and to finish Kiana James off, she locks in a PTO, with the rookie nearly immediately tapping out. Paige advances in the tournament, but can she go all the way to the finals and hell, even win the Royal Rumble? Well, before we find out, it's time for the NXT Women's Championship match. As with Fallon Henley and Jasmine Nix preparing for the Battle Royal later in the night, the Pure 101 match is on, and Jacy Jayne demands for Jordynne Grace to bring it, which she does, as she nearly launches the champ to the outside, although she hangs on for dear life as she attempts to descend from the heavens. However, the Juggernaut catches her, but the Toxic Attraction fights out of it with 3 shots to the skull before looking for a kick. Yet Grace counters and drops her with a DDT. And after smashing her head into the ground, the challenger launches the champ into the air back down to reality. And from here, she hurls Jacy into the corner and connects a breathtaking chop and a quick-fire German suplex. Though as she goes for another, Jacy reverses and attempts to steal the win early, but this doesn't work, so the champion nails 2 back-to-back super kicks alongside a clothesline before connecting back-to-back standing sentons. And after slowly working over the Juggernaut in the corner with a choke with her foot, along with some vicious stomps, she just face washes the challenger before chucking her out of the ring like trash. And she follows, though Grace fights back with her knee as she hurls Jacy into the barricade and smacks her down. She even puts her gut first onto the barricade as well. And after putting her into the ring, Grace now ascends to the heavens, though she crashes and burns, with Jacy even nailing a bicycle kick as she scurries into the cover. However, Jordynne Grace kicks out, so she takes a page out of Charlotte Flair's book and nails a natural selection. But once again, the Juggernaut survives, and her follow-up side effect is nowhere to be found, as Grace fights back, and after throwing her around like a sack of crap, she picks her up and connects none other than a muscle buster. Samoa Joe would be proud, although he wouldn't like the fact that Jacy Jayne kicks out, so she looks for a Grace driver, though Jacy Jayne counters and looks for a knockout shot, which gets countered again, and after one more counter from the NXT Women's Champion, she nails the discus elbow, the move that won her the championship, but it's not the move that will help her retain on this night. She's stunned, but JC stays on task as she looks for a super kick which misses, though Jordan's own attack backfires with the super kick connecting, which gets a big boot for retaliation from the Juggernaut. And she then rolls to the outside, which gives Grace an idea, as she dives off the top rope to the concrete floor. And after smashing it onto the barricade once again, she keeps her grasp and launches JC Jane into the ring post ribs first. Then she sends her into the ring and grabs and deadlifts her up with a picture-perfect bridging German suplex. Is the champ done just like that? Well, not quite yet, as she survives, though she's not thriving, which can be seen when Grace deadlifts suplex Jane off the top rope. But she's not done, as she connects a powerbomb, and to finish off this trifecta, she picks her up, yet JC fights back with a trio of elbows, which is quickly followed up by a discus kick. JC is desperate for the win, but she can't get it quite yet, as Jordan Grace once again kicks out, with Jane's frustrations growing. So she looks for a middle rope senton, which gets her a vicious clothesline for her troubles, and after another, she decides her next best course of action is to sweep the legs. And with a Viper Bomb, she goes into the cover, yet just like before, and more likely just like the next time, she kicks out. So Jordan Grace goes for the Grace Driver, though a roll-up is all she can get, yet she manages to jolt out the cover, which gets her a discus forearm before being pulled back up and being nailed with another. And with that, JC Jane has retained. She's conquered the Juggernaut. She has proven herself as the Titan of the NXT Women's Division. Although up next, it's time for Jade Cargill to try and attempt to close this chapter of her WWE career against Naomi. But can she win? Well, the match is on, and Naomi immediately connects a rear view, a move she used to win in the past, but that doesn't help tonight as Jade kicks out, so she immediately transitions into a submission, yet Jade fights out of it and takes down her former best friend. And from here, Jade dominates, as she hits huge power moves over and over again, though Naomi sticks in the fight even though she isn't thriving. But this all changes rather quickly at the climax of this match, as Naomi goes to grab a chair as she smacks it relentlessly into the storm. But she isn't satisfied, as she then grabs a table and sets it up. Cargill is helpless to the assault as she gets put through it. She's done, and Naomi knows it, as she throws her into the ring, and with not one split-legged moonsault, but with two, Naomi wins. She stands tall, and she builds momentum ahead of her eventual cash-in. But can Becky Lynch retain a Women's Intercontinental Championship against Bayley and Lyra Valkyria? Well, the match is on, and Lyra immediately connects a spinning heel kick onto Bayley. She wants Becky all to herself, and she gets it even if it's temporary, as she makes the best of her opportunity by clobbering the man with a plethora of strikes over and over again, which culminates in Lyra sending Becky out of the ring before building momentum and double foot stomping the man before going back into the ring and doing the same for Bayley. Although she goes for a third on the big time Bex, she manages to catch the Bird Lady and plant her onto the hardest part of the ring. But before she can take advantage, Bayley comes out of nowhere and sends her into the steel steps before whipping the former champ into a barricade. Yet as she goes back to assaulting Becky, she counters and Scorpion Death drops her on the concrete floor. And with a slam onto the hardest part of the ring, she then goes for a suplex, although the role model manages to escape and even connects a chop block, and this allows for a Bayley to belly to be dropped early in the match. And after smashing Lyra's skull into a barricade and taking her down, Bayley then sends Lyra into the ring and ascends to the heavens. However, the Burn Lady gets up quicker than expected, which leads to Lyra impressively catching her, although Bayley counters as she looks for a rose plant, which is nowhere to be found, as both women trade counters on top of counters like there's no tomorrow. That is until Becky takes down both women, and with Bayley on the outside, the man dives onto the role model. But she's not done, as she manhandle slams her opponent onto the barricade. Bayley is out of contention, at least for now, as the man goes to fight the Burn Lady, which includes her locking in a disarmer. However, the Burn Lady fights out of it, although she gets put straight back down. Yet Lyra quickly attempts to roll Becky up, but this only gets her a 2 count, so she continues on, as after a brief back and forth, the Burn Lady catches the man's leg and twists it into a German suplex, and she nails another, although before she goes for a third, she notices Bayley, as the two decide to team up on Big Time Bex, with them connecting a double suplex. But as they go for another, Becky is able to smash their skulls together before taking them both down again, this time with a pair of stiff forearms. And with Lyra rolling to the outside, Becky decides to lock in a fancy armbar onto Bayley. Yet she won't tap, as she fights out of the hold with punches that even hurt herself. But then Lyra comes out of nowhere and dives onto both horsewomen, wiping them both out. And Lyra looks for a nightmare onto Becky. However, she escapes it with 3 elbows, and with 2 punches, she then nails a manhandle slam. Yet Bayley breaks up the pin at the last possible moment, and this makes the man irate as she lays into the role model with strikes. But Bayley catches Becky with an exploder suplex in the corner, and with this comes an opportunity as she nails the rose plant on Becky Lynch. Yet Lyra then surprise attacks the role model with a roll-up. Though with the inadvertent assault from Bayley breaking up the pin, the slower count gives the hugger life. Yet this life gets snuffed out with a gory fisherman buster. Lyra thinks the match is done, and it would be had Becky Lynch not broken up the pin. And the aggression from Becky translates to Lyra as she pummels the man, even sending her out of the ring. Yet Bayley attempts to capitalize on this distraction, which ultimately fails as Lyra fights back, and with a Nightwing, she looks to end the match. But then Becky Lynch tries to steal the pin as she sends Lyra out of the ring and hooks Bayley's leg, though she kicks out. Becky Lynch is in disbelief, and this disbelief causes her to be distracted long enough for Lyra to not only get up, but to suplex Becky onto the concrete floor as well. However, as soon as this happens, Bayley gets up and goes to the top rope, and with every bit of energy she has left, nails an elbow drop to the outside, as she then throws Becky into the ring, and from here, she decides to debut a new finishing move, as she hoists her up and connects a butterfly lung blower. And this new move of hers works to perfection, as the role model is now the new Women's Intercontinental Champion. Becky Lynch has already been dethroned. Bayley is now the champ who runs the camp, although Lyra never got pinned, so many can assume that Lyra Valkyria will still be gunning for that championship. The championship she never lost clean. But who will win the Evolution Battle Royal? Well, after a plethora of eliminations, we reach the final 4, as we're down to 1 woman per brand. Stephanie Vaquer for Raw, Nia Jax for SmackDown, Blake Monroe for NXT, and Zayda Steele for Evolve. Who will punch their ticket to Clash in Paris? Well, it won't be Nia Jax, as after a vast amount of effort, La Primera and the Glamour, with all the power they can muster, dumps out the Irresistible Force. Then we get a hell of a stare down, which turns into a hell of a brawl. Neither woman has the advantage. That is until Zeta Steel comes out of nowhere and attempts to eliminate Blake Monroe, before then attempting to do the same with Stephanie Vaquer. But neither works out, which she doesn't realise until it's too late, as both women beat the holy hell out of the Evolved Star, and this includes a double suplex before Blake nails a knee lift alongside a Phantom Driver before allowing Vaquer to nail an Eat Defeat at SVP and to put the bow on Zeta Steel's time on Evolution. Both Blake and Stephanie eliminate the rookie. We're down to 2, who will go to Clash in Paris, while the former Mariah May immediately hits a hip toss knee strike before looking for another Phantom Driver. However, Vaquer gets out of it, and then she connects one more SVP, but she wants to put on a show as she goes to the top rope and nails a picture-perfect, beautiful corkscrew moonsault. And from here, Vaquer superkicks Monroe out of the match. La Primera has won. She's punched her ticket to France. She's going to Clash in Paris. She's got a World Championship opportunity. But who the hell will the champion be by then? Well, a similar question can be asked about the Women's Tag Team Championships. Who will still hold her by the end of the night? While the match is on and it's pure chaos. There's bodies everywhere. Although in the anarchy, Bliss tries to steal the win, which of course doesn't work. So she decides to grab a kendo stick. However, Nikki takes it off her before delivering a kick and a roundhouse one, although Sol Ruka then German suplexes her in response. And up on the ramp, we see Roxanne Perez and Brie Bella do battle, as they trade reversals and strikes continuously until Brie decides to send Roxanne into the barricade. Though the Prodigy fights back, as with a shot to the gut, it's now Perez's turn to send Brie into the barricade. But as she goes for a kick, Brie mode activates, as the leader of the Brie movement crucifixes the rookie. However, she fights back, as the two end up trading countered elbow strikes, before Roxy then just DDTs Brie onto the concrete floor. And whilst anarchy rages on around them, Roxanne Perez continues to pummel the legend with punches and an eventual slap. But she still isn't done, as Roxy unbelievably powerbombs her onto the concrete floor as well. And after a backhand spring senton, Brie Bella is taken out of the match with a pop rocks. And after all this, we see Raquel Rodriguez hurl Alexa Bliss into the fans, with her following suit, as she drags her further into the crowd until Bliss fights out of her grasp. But Raquel then just sends her opposition into a storage box. Although Bliss flips out of Rodriguez's next move, yet a clothesline is all she can get from this, though she slips out of a move again and dives off a storage box. So she then grabs a baseball bat, yet Raquel regains control as she smashes it into Bliss over and over again until eventually the champ concedes and drops the weapon, only for her to nail a gory slam onto a standing steel chair. Alexa Bliss is out, and after a Tejada bomb, she well and truly is, as she's wiped out of the match just like Brie. And so is Charlotte Flair, as Zarya F5s the Queen onto the concrete floor. She's done as well, and then we see Raquel Rodriguez drag Nikki Bella to the outside as she powerbombs Nikki onto the barricade. All the while, Roxanne Perez locks in a crossface on Sol Ruka. She has nowhere to go, but Zarya is able to break up the pin, although she can't do much more, as Raquel Rodriguez grabs her, with the two beasts subsequently brawling. and this gives Perez an opening as she goes to the outside, looks under the ring, and grabs a steel chair. However, as she goes into the ring, Zarya moves, Raquel's been hit, and with both women now in the same exact corner, Zarya does something iconic as she lifts the Judgment Day up all by her lonesome, and with the strength of a god, she F5s both women. And with Sol getting back into the ring as Zarya holds Roxy in place, the Soul Snatcher is able to connect, which well and truly snatches the soul of the Prodigy. Zaruka have won, and it's all because of Roxy's own mistake. But regardless of that, Zarya has won her first championship in WWE. Sol Ruka is now a triple champion, and Zaruka are on top of the world. But who will be on top of the world at the end of the WWE Women's Championship match between Trish Stratus and Tiffany Stratton? Well, the match is on, and both competitors stare holes through one another, although eventually they go towards the center of the ring, refusing to let the other out of their gaze. That is until Trish nails a chick kick out of nowhere, and she quickly follows this up with some Stratusfaction as she scurries into the cover. Is the match over just like that? Well, not quite yet, as Tiffy kicks out. So Trishy looks for another Stratusfaction, although the champ manages to send the challenger out of the ring. And once she gets up, she's met by a full head of Tiffy steam. And after sending Stratus into the barricade, Stratton nails a big diving forearm, but Trish fights back with a well-timed knee before sending Tiffany into the barricade along with the steel steps. And with a double axe handle, she sends the champion into the ring as she naturally joins her. And from here, she nails a DDT and arrogantly goes into the cover. She thinks that'll do it, yet she's proven wrong. So she stays on top of Tiffy with a trio of stomps to the gut and chest. And with a Northern Light suplex, she once again tries to put the champ away. Yet once again, Tiffany Stratton survives. So Trish Stratus continues to methodically work over the champion, as she even nails a kick to the stomach and back. Then she throws Tiffy into the corner and just strikes her down, before choking the life out of Stratton with her own goddamn boot. But as she looks for a gut-wrench suplex, Tiffy counters before nailing a dropkick to the back. And then she goes high, although the come down is quite rough, as Trishy moves and connects a big bicycle kick, knocking her out cold. Or so you think, as she once again kicks out at 2. So she then decides to go high risk as well, but Tiffany kicks up and meets her up there, as she even connects a huge avalanche suplex. Though by the time she can get into the cover, Trish recovers enough to kick out. So she looks for a powerbomb. However, the challenger escapes out of it with 3 punches, although she can't follow up on this, as she gets power slammed for another near fall. And then she does indeed connect the powerbomb, and with a big stomp to the gut, she rebounds off the ropes and connects another drop kick. Then Trish desperately crawls into the corner, though as she does, Tiffy nails a Sting-esque splash onto the legend. Yet Trish fights back with continuous elbows alongside a brutal chop. And it's now Tiffany's turn to crawl into the corner as Trish hits a running forearm before going to the middle rope to connect the double axe handle. Then she goes for a Stratosphere, although Tiffany is able to counter it, and subsequently she connects a splash. Yet Trish escapes Tiffy's next potential move, although the chick kick is countered all the same, with the champ nailing a float over Alabama Slam. And she of course goes into the cover, though Trishy kicks out. So the champ then nails a middle rope drop kick before looking for the prettiest moonsault ever. However, Trish is able to catch her mid-air with her planting the champ down, and subsequently she looks for a suplex, even though Tiffany slips out a neckbreaker as the legend. And she's not done, as she looks for a standing moonsault, yet no one's home, which is the same with Trish's chick kick, as Tiffany Stratton clobbers Trish Stratus with 3 stiff elbows back to back to back before planting her down as she looks for another PME, yet no one's home again as Trish attempts to roll up Tiffy and steal the championship, but this doesn't work, so she puts Tiffany into the corner, hoisting her up to the top rope as she finally connects the Stratosphere. Yet she wants one more move as she looks for one more chick kick, although Tiffy ducks, and once she takes down the challenger, she connects a picture-perfect springboard swanton bomb. But it's now Tiffany who wants one more move, as after the prettiest moonsault ever finally hitting, Tiffy time reigns supreme. She has defeated Trish Stratus, and now she has Jade Cargill to look forward to, who comes out with a downed Naomi before throwing her aside and taunting at her future opponent. Although now, it's time for the main event of the evening. Can Rhea Ripley become Women's World Champion, or will Io Sky retain? Well, the match is on, and the 2 stars lock up, although Barbie overpowers the Genius of the Sky, pushing her against the ropes, yet she releases the pressure before the referee's 5 count. So they lock up again, with Io grabbing Rhea's arm to work over it, hitting it in that area, before Barbie can reverse this to her own benefit, although Io is able to slam her shoulders into the mat, as she then connects double knees to the gut and tries to get the early win, which of course doesn't work. As Rhea kicks back, though her subsequent headbutt is nowhere to be found, as Io Hurricanranas are down, and after a kick to the back, she nails one drop style to the head, and Rhea very wisely rolls to the outside, although this puts her in the firing lines for a big suicide dive courtesy of the Genius of the Sky. But she's not done, as once the challenger gets up, she nails a breathtaking moonsault on the outside. And after quickly breaking up the count, she goes for a second. Only this time, Rhea Ripley is able to catch her and drive her into the barricade. Yet once isn't enough for her, as she does it again, and to switch it up, she hurls Io into the ring post ribs first. And after putting her into the ring, she looks for an electric chair, but Io counters into another Hurricanrana. Although she Irish whips Mommy, she gets caught with a blood-curling super kick. And with a huge choke bomb, she sends Io into the corner and big boots her back down. And after a knee, she does another choke bomb, this time throwing her into the turnbuckle. But the subsequent German suplex gets countered into a surprise roll-up, which can only get her a 2 count. Though she then runs off the ropes, which just like in the previous match, results in some brutality. However, Io Sky kicks back before rolling through and nailing a double foot stomp. Then she taunts to the crowd, which allows Rhea to blast Io with a headbutt out of thin air, and Mommy decides to go to the top, yet just like the previous match again, her opposition kicks up, meets her up there, and plants her back down onto the mat. Only this time, this gets countered, as Rhea powerbombs Io from the top, and after dragging her up, she kicks her in the gut and actually nails the Riptide, the move that's put so many other women down. Yet Io is not like the others, as she kicks out. So Rhea goes for another, but Io uppercuts her way out of the situation. Although her double foot stomp is nowhere to be found, as she gets big booted back down. And it's now Io's turn to go to the outside and of course, get dived on. But as Rhea looks for a second, Io Sky unbelievably manages to catch her and plant her onto the apron. And from here, she redecorates the announcer's table. But this turns into a mistake, as Rhea picks her up and connects an electric chair facebuster onto the desk. And after breaking up the count again, she looks to put Io through the table. Yet she counters, and with a kick to the gut, she DDTs Mommy onto it, and Io follows this through with a big dive off of it. Although as she looks for another, Rhea catches and powerbombs Io onto the announcer's table. And once she sends her into the ring, she locks in a submission. She wants to make Io Sky tap, though she refuses to oblige, as with all of her might, she gets out of the hold. only to be tossed into the sky again for her troubles after a striking combination. Then Rhea just powers her around with big power moves left, right and centre, yet Io continues to fight no matter what gets thrown at her, as she even counters another headbutt as she delivers a bloodying kick. And after ensuring she stays in the corner, Io does a big run back and forth to nail the double knees onto a now lifeless Mami. This is her chance, and she takes it as she goes to the top rope and nails the moonsault. This is how she won the Women's World Championship, but it's not how she retains it, as Rhea kicks out before actually crawling to her feet, and Io actually loves this as she demands the fight. And Rhea attempts to deliver, although her kick gets caught with Io spinning her around and hammering into her with everything she can think of. But nothing can seemingly keep her down, so after a stiff forearm can't do the job, Io just asks Rhea for some back, which now gets delivered in abundance, as Io gets lit up with a bunch of different strikes culminating in another big boot. And from here, she digs deep into a bag of tricks by connecting a frog splash, one Dominic Mysterio would be ashamed of as Io Sky kicks out. Rhea is in disbelief, so she goes big, the biggest she can, as she looks for the Avalanche Riptide, yet just like when Io was crowned, it gets turned into a beautiful Hurricanrana. And this gets followed through the exact same as well, with the second moonsault landing. Yet once again, Mami lives. Io doesn't know what to do, so she just goes for one more, but no one's home, as this allows Rhea to connect a second Riptide, but just like before, Io Sky kicks out. So Rhea gets an idea as she looks over at the table, as after throwing Io out of the ring, she splashes her before looking to put her through the announcer's table. Yet Io fights back and delivers a knockout kick, and it's then Io who gets a sinister idea as she puts Rhea onto the table, going into the ring, climbing to the top rope and moonsaulting Rhea through the bloody table. And after eventually putting her into the ring, she follows this up with a jaw-dropping Avalanche Spanish Fly. But somehow, someway, Rhea Bloody Ripley finds a way to kick out at 2. And as one last stand, after she gets up, it's now her who demands for Io to bring it. And the champion does just that, as she nails a double foot stomp to the chest, before ascending to the heavens one final time as she nails a moon stomp as she goes into the cover, and finally this war ends. Io Sky stays undefeated against Rhea Ripley, and the show ends with Io Sky ultimately standing tall. And if you like this story, I think this might interest you.